What if the animal you feel closest to is quietly telling you something about the kind of love you trust most? This isn't about being a cat person versus a dog person. Researchers at Carroll University in 2014 found that self-identified cat people score measurably higher in openness and sensitivity than their dog-preferring counterparts. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby, argues that early bonds shape every relationship we seek afterward, including, it turns out, our relationships with animals. The patterns run deep. A cat doesn't need you to be emotionally available every moment. It doesn't demand eye contact, reassurance, or constant performance. It arrives on its own terms, stays only as long as it chooses, and leaves without explanation. For some people, that low-demand dynamic isn't a consolation prize. It's the specific shape of safety their nervous system has learned to recognize. And that tells us something about how they were wired early on. Psychologists identify a pattern called avoidant attachment, a style where closeness feels threatening, where autonomy is fiercely protected, and where the ideal relationship involves connection without the risk of engulfment. But here's where it gets more complicated. Avoidant attachment doesn't explain every cat lover. Many people with fully secure attachment styles also prefer cats. The draw runs through multiple psychological channels at once. Research suggests that cat people value autonomy, a trait defined as the need to direct one's own life without external pressure. They don't just tolerate independence, they require it. For a high autonomy person, constant social demands, even affectionate ones, can register as noise. Not cruelty, not coldness, just overstimulation. The nervous system reaches its ceiling faster than others expect. Here's the paradox most people miss. Cat people aren't emotionally shallow. They love intensely. They simply distrust love that requires constant performance to stay alive. A cat can't be coerced into affection. It can't be trained to perform love on schedule. When a cat chooses to sit beside you, that choice is unambiguous. For some people, that uncorrupted signal is the only kind they fully trust. Emotional labor, the work of managing another being's feelings, is exhausting when it's constant. Cats redistribute that weight. They ask almost nothing emotionally. That redistribution isn't laziness. Cat purring vibrates between 25 and 150 hertz, a frequency range that can have calming effects on humans. The body responds before the mind decides how to feel. Highly sensitive people, a trait identified by psychologist Elaine Aron in 1996, process sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. Nonverbal companionship strips out the cognitive overhead of language entirely. That's not nothing. Behavioral researchers have documented that cats spend roughly 70% of their lives in a resting state, not from laziness, but from an efficient nervous system that activates only when needed. For people prone to chronic overarousal, that pattern isn't just appealing, it's instructive. But here's a finding that reframes everything. Some studies suggest that cat owners report higher rates of loneliness than dog owners, even while actively choosing more solitary lifestyles. Solitude and loneliness aren't the same wound. Chosen solitude is a preference. Loneliness is a gap between the connection you have and the connection you need. Cat people often occupy both at once, wanting to be deeply known while keeping the outside world at a careful distance. What a cat provides is rare in human relationships, being witnessed without being evaluated. No judgment calibrated to your productivity, your mood, your social performance, just quiet acknowledgement that you exist, and that's enough. Bowlby's secure base concept holds that we explore the world more freely when we have a safe anchor to return to. For cat people, that anchor is often non-human, quieter, less conditional, and therefore more reliably present in the nervous system's accounting. The deepest insight here is this: preferring cats is rarely about an inability to connect. It reflects a calibrated standard. These people have often been burned by connection that came with hidden conditions. They learn to read sincerity carefully. The pattern holds across every relationship cat people tend to build: fewer but deeper friendships, romantic partners who respect silence, work environments that allow unstructured focus. Cat preference is one expression of a broader relational architecture. Elaine Aron, whose research defines the highly sensitive person framework, explicitly distinguishes adaptive withdrawal, a healthy response to overstimulation, from avoidant pathology. Most cat-preferring people fall into the former category, optimized for depth, not disordered by it. In intimate relationships, cat people typically need longer trust-building timelines, not because they're cold, but because they're reading for consistency. They watch what you do when there's nothing to perform for. If someone in your life is a committed cat person, this matters practically. Don't interpret their need for solitude as rejection. Don't read their emotional restraint as indifference. They're not withholding. They're protecting something they've learned is fragile. Society consistently misreads selective people as damaged. But the Anthrozois data is instructive. The same cat owners who reported higher loneliness also reported higher life satisfaction in domains of autonomy and meaning. Selectivity isn't erosion. It's a trade-off made with open eyes. Since 2020, cat adoptions in the United States have increased significantly. That timing isn't coincidental. A collective nervous system under sustained stress reached quietly and en masse for low-demand companionship. That collective reach tells us something uncomfortable. When ambient social demand becomes too loud, people don't stop wanting connection. They seek a version that doesn't cost them everything to maintain. Return to the original question. What does a deep bond with an independent animal reveal? It reveals what a person believes love should feel like. Free of obligation, free of performance, arriving because it genuinely wants to. Consider what Guastello's Carroll University data showed when mapped together. The traits clustering around cat preference, openness, sensitivity, autonomy, empathy, are often linked to introversion and intelligence. The person who needs quiet to function is often the person doing the most rigorous thinking. So when someone tells you their cat is their closest companion, hear what they're actually saying. They've found a relationship where the love is never in question, where they don't have to earn presence. Bowlby's attachment research ultimately argued that knowing your own attachment style is the first step toward changing it, or honoring it. Cat people, often without knowing the clinical language, have already done that work. They've identified what restores them and built their world accordingly. Knowing the shape of love your nervous system trusts isn't a limitation. It's a form of self-knowledge that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. The cat, it turns out, already knew.